Hello everyone, I hope everyone is having a blissful Sunday. My name is East Brave and welcome back to The Passion Project, where I'll explore millions of podcasts widely available on all streaming services and report back to you to give you my honest take and review. If you haven't already watched episode 2, go check that out after this. If you have already watched it and you are back for more, then welcome back to our third installment. I also like to thank you all for your continuous support, and you can continue to do that by liking and subscribing to our channel, but more importantly, watch and share our video because that will help grow our community and our channel. The last thing is that if there is a podcast that you are currently listening to that isn't on my radar, reach out, put me on, and I'll be sure to put out a future episode reviewing that podcast. Let's cut the intro and start today's episode. Before we embark on our journey, I like to start with a quick disclaimer. The podcast that we will be reviewing today has a total of 5 seasons. So there was actually a lot for us to unpack. We can't package everything into a single video. Therefore, we decided to split the episode into 2 parts. Part 1 consists of season 1, 2, and 3. Then we will return for the following week for the last part, which covers season 4 and 5. I'm going to add that this podcast does contain very descriptive, violent materials, strong language, and adult themes which may be unsuitable for younger audiences. With all things considered, choose how and when you'll listen. For today's episode, we will be reviewing a podcast called Our Thing. Now, this podcast host is Salvador Gravano, more commonly known as Sammy The Bull, who became the underboss of the Gambino crime family. Herein, we will refer to Salvador Gravano by his professional name, Sammy, or Sammy the Bull, and we will use them interchangeably. Sammy was born March 19, 1945 in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, New York. He originally got his nickname by a well-known high-ranking mobster from the neighborhood who saw Sammy fight off 2 older kids trying to steal his brand new bike that his parents had just recently purchased for him. Now, the mobster was so impressed by what he saw, he started to refer to Sammy as Sammy the Bull, because he fought like a bull. Since then, that name had stuck with him throughout his life. Now, as a child, Sammy struggled to fit in school with his peers due to a condition called dyslexia. With this condition, he did poorly in school and was often bullied for not being academically sound. He got into 3 separate incidents where he punched a teacher and 2 other students. The school decided that they had enough after Sammy broke a student's jaw, which ultimately led to Sammy being removed from the school. Sammy joined a neighborhood street gang called the Rampers at the age of 13, which consisted of members within the neighborhood. This was when Sammy started to build a reputation for the work that he was putting in. Words were circulating around, which he was then vetted and recruited to be an associate of the Colombo crime family. Later in the Colombos, there was an incident where he broke one of the golden rules. The mafia is very structured and political, and he found himself in a dire and life-threatening situation where he could have been killed. This was when his character started to really shine amongst his peers. The family agreed that he may have broken a golden rule. However, in finding out his reason, which led him up to the offense, everyone agreed upon that it was an honorable one. The life of a mobster is very technical, where respect and honor walks a fine line between life and death. Sammy knew that this was a part of the life. The family decided to spare his life and transferred him over to the Gambino crime family. The Gambino crime family was where Sammy remained as he rose up the ranks for the remainder of his career within the mafia. In 1976, he became a made member of the Gambino crime family. A made member means you are a fully initiated member. It is the highest membership you can earn being in the mafia. Being a made member meant that you were untouchable. So for example, if someone wanted to fuck with you or has planned to permanently remove you off the face of the earth, they would first have to ask permission from the high table. Because if you harm or even threaten a made member without the blessings of the high table, it would mean an automatic death sentence. And you won't even see it coming because it's usually your most trusted friend. They would be the one given the order to walk you into your demise. Now, Sammy was involved in 3 mafia wars where he played a major role in orchestrating and planning some of the biggest hits on American soil. Sammy was a hitman, and a really good one too. The most infamous hit being the head of the Gambino crime family, Paul Castellano, who was the boss of all bosses. On December 16th, 1985, Paul Castellano was gunned down gangman style right in front of Spark Steakhouse. This is pretty crazy to me because I was born, on December 1985. So this was 6 days before I was born. Once the hit was done on Paul Castellano, the Gambino family had to restructure, so they did go through a transitioning period. When it was all said and done, John Gotti was nominated and appointed as the new boss of all bosses, and Sammy the Bull would become the underboss. At this point, Sammy was at the height of his career, but there is a saying that nothing lasts forever, because in 1991, Sammy would turn government informant to testify against former boss John Gotti after hearing the things he said about him over hundreds of hours of wiretaps. John Gotti also instructed during this time that Sammy would take the fall for everything. So you can imagine how Sammy felt. This man not only rigged court cases for John, which birthed his nickname, the Teflon Don, but he would go on to plot and meticulously plan arguably the greatest mob hit in American history, which laid the foundation so that John can become what he is. After all Sammy has done for John, Sammy viewed this to be the greatest betrayal and an end of their blood oath. And this was the end of the new beginning of La Costa Nostra. I like to digress quickly that Costa Nostra is Italian for our thing, hence, that is the name of this podcast that we will be reviewing today. It means an undertaking of blood ceremony to take an oath in the code of silence and to be sworn into secrecy and brotherhood. It is not just about being a part of an organization, but La Costa Nostra was the way of life that a mobster would live and abide by. Costa Nostra governs the chaos and madness of being in that life. It is the highest form of principles, morals, integrity, and honor that one must hold in high regard, because failure to do so can result in repercussions or sometimes even death. This is crazy to me because I remember when they were indicted in 1991, it was literally plastered all over the news. I recall vividly watching this in the living room with my parents on TV. I was 6 years old at the time. So it's pretty crazy. Sammy got a light sentence in exchange for his cooperation in taking down the most powerful crime family to its knees. I'm going to add that he admitted to 19 murders that he was involved in. He served a total of 5 years and was later released in 1995 when he entered the witness protection in Colorado. At first, he didn't like the restriction that they had on him, so he did about 8 months of the program and he decided to leave the program shortly thereafter. I have mentioned in my previous episode about being in the witness protection, where they have very strict rules that you must abide by. Failure to do so, they can revoke their right to protect you because you're putting them in jeopardy and you're putting their life at risk or in harm's way. But come on, I don't blame Sammy for leaving the program. I mean, after all, he's a hitman. He did caught 19 bodies for the mafia. There is a fictional character named Vigo in the movie John Wick. Have you ever seen that movie? It's a great movie. So there's a part where his son says, "Oh, who are you scared of? This the Baba Yaga?" And then he would grab his son's hair and pulls it towards him and whispers in his ear, he's not the boogeyman. He's the one you sent to go kill the boogeyman. So yeah, I mean, I don't blame Sammy for leaving. He is the guy. He's that guy that you send after the hitman. Okay, so after leaving the witness protection program, Sammy relocated to Arizona with his family, where he stayed and currently reside up to this day. Sammy once again was shot into the spotlight on February the 24th, 2000, after an investigation on a drug syndicate operating in Arizona. This syndicate was headed by Sammy and his son, Gerald. He was later sentenced on October 2002 to 19 years in prison after pleading guilty to 10 felony charges. This includes the following: conspiracy to sell dangerous drugs, participating in a criminal syndicate, illegal enterprise, money laundering, weapon misconduct, just to name a few. Sammy was again released from prison in September 2017. So I think he did about 15 years. Yeah, since then he did stay out of trouble. Before we get into reviewing the podcast, here's some FYI. There are five main factions of the mafia family in New York City. They are the Gambino, the Lucchese, the Genevieves, the Bonanno, and the Colombos. The Gambino family was recently on the news late of last year, back in November. They were indicted on racketeering charges, so some of the families are still active today. The Gambino being the most prevalent because they were recently shot into the spotlight. Now, just because you don't hear anything about the other four factions does not mean that they are not active. They're just, that's just one of the things that I admire about the mafia. They remind me of the triads. They are sworn to secrecy and the code of silence. They're quiet, and they work in the shadows. It's like that saying: the loudest one in the room is usually the weakest one in the room, and they are the complete opposite of this saying. Okay, now about the podcast. The podcast that we will be reviewing today is called Our Thing. It is a first person narrator podcast who gives us his first account in his notorious, untold true story of his life being in the mafia. The first episode of season one was first aired on December the 15th, 2020, and there's a total of 9 episodes in season one. The first episode of season two was aired on August the 12th, 2021, and there's a total of 8 episodes in season two. There is actually a bonus episode at the end of season two where Sammy reviews Joe Rogan's video on what he thinks about Sammy and his podcast. And lastly, in season three, the first episode was aired on November 21st, 2021. There is a total of 5 main episodes, along with 20 additional segments that he just added, and it's called The Fireside with the Underboss, which tallies up to 25 episodes altogether. To sum that up, we get our main episode, which goes with the theme of season one and two. In season three, Sammy added a new segment where he tells other stories that are shorter in length. But, they're funny. Some of them is thought provoking, and they're just great all around. Now, Sammy does have a Patreon on his website where he releases exclusive video content, and it's only available to paid members. I just checked today, they're actually no longer on there. But he has done some collaborations with other people. But again, you do have to be a paid member. I'm pretty sure he has other things in the works right now. But I'm personally not a subscriber, but that shouldn't stop you from supporting a content creator because that's how they eat, and that's how they continue to put out great stuff for us, right? Because they're dedicating a lot of time and effort to put out stuff for us. Now he also has merch, so that's another way that you can actually support content creators is by buying their merch. So he has a lot of cool things to buy on his website. The coolest thing that he does have is like a bunch of things that are signed collectibles. So it could be like a baseball, and he'll have his like autograph on there. So yeah, they can be purchased. I believe Sammy is currently 79 years old. Therefore, when he does pass away, and hopefully through a natural causes, because that life only, you know, you end up in jail or you die. That's just how it is, right? But there will be collectors out there looking for these type of things, right? They're crazy about it. Another cool thing about his website is there is a category listed as the crew. When you click on it, and you will actually see all the pictures and details about his crew member that he was running around with during his reign and terror in the 80s. Now, a lot of these members are mentioned in his story, which is a great full picture of why Sammy was so feared, is because his crew was just as tough and dangerous as Sammy. So yeah, most of these guys are dead. So I feel like this is a great tribute that he did for them in their memory. So I tip my hat to that, Sammy. Okay, moving on. Let's get into the good, the bad, and the ugly. Let's start with the good, because we all love good news. What I like about this podcast is that it's extremely entertaining. The first episode was aired during the pandemic. This was during a worldwide lockdown. Everything was locked down, and there wasn't much to do. We were all isolated at home, bored out of our minds, divorce rate on the rise. It was a crazy, crazy time. And then there were the essential workers who would go to work. But luckily for me, I was an essential worker, so therefore I had a lot of time to burn. So this podcast, along with a few other really good ones, really helped me get through some of the most toughest times of my life. You know, during this time, I did go through deep trauma therapy as well to help with all the traumas that I had growing up in my household. Um, yeah, man, it was just a really tough time, not just for myself, but for everyone. This podcast could not have chosen a better time to hit the market. So, Sammy, call it luck or God's timing. Whatever it is, what's meant for you will be for you. What I also like about this podcast is the audio and sound production. I mentioned in previous episode that podcast is an audio experience. It's like watching a movie but without the visuals. Now, I do love the theme intro song. I do like the underground subways, the sirens, and the city sounds of New York City just blaring in the background during those, transitioning periods. So it'll be like 1965, and then you'll hear, you know, a little bit of New York City just kind of like in the background there. So those were great transitioning periods there because he's originally from New York, born there. Um, his career as a criminal was there as well. So what better the way to have it than to have some noises that people who live in New York can identify. I also like the music production that's being used as he tells some of his greatest stories. Sometimes the music could be sad, could be captivating, it could be empathetic. Sometimes it's scary, sometimes it's thrilling, and sometimes eerie. But it all depends on the story that Sammy is like telling. I feel like that is one of the great piece of thing about this podcast is that they really know what strings to pull, and they use audio to really heighten our emotion to kind of match the story. So it truly is an amazing experience. So, you know, hey man, I hope you're paying your team, whoever's in charge of the sound and audio production, because they need a raise if you're not paying them well. I love the stories being told in this podcast by Sammy. Let me tell you, um, his storytelling abilities are really unmatched. The stories he tells are in such great details that it actually feels like you have traveled back in time in the time machine and you are literally right there in his presence, seeing everything being unfolded right in front of your very own eyes. Another thing I like about this podcast is he gives us a window into this world, and very little was known about the mafia until the government really started to crack down on organized crime in the 70s. I like to quickly digress that the RICO law is Organized Crime Control Act of 1970. It was actually created to prosecute the mafia. It was designed to go after the entire organization and not the individual or the individual crime. So um, they had a hard time putting away mafia bosses because they couldn't tie all the orders where the boss would say, "Hey, you, I want you to go out and terminate this guy." They couldn't charge him for that, so that's why the RICO law was created. It was actually to go after the mafia. So this goes after the entire organization. So if you're the leader and you have all these soldiers beneath you, whatever they do gets tied right back up to you. Now, if you weren't on the investigator unit, chances are you won't know anything about the mafia. So that's what I like about this podcast is because he really educates us on the rules of La Costa Nostra, the power structure of the mafia, how things are done, or how situations get handled. It's like having the birds and bees talk with our parents, except it's with Sammy about the life of being in the mafia. I also like the street vernacular that was introduced to us. It does actually take a few episodes for you to catch on, but once you do, boy, don't be surprised that you'll start using the lingo amongst your friends. So, another thing I like about this podcast is there is actually a lot of food for thought. I feel like there are moments that I viewed it as like very poetic. As Sammy tells us that the suspense are extremely high being in the life, where often the lessons and rewards comes as a mismatch. In one of his episode, he tells us when he did his first hit, he stated that he had power over life and death. Like, damn, that's pretty deep. He also stated that it felt like a piece of him died that day. I found that to be compelling as well. Also, in another episode, he was given an order to take out his close friends because he was bad mouthing the boss. He was extremely unhappy with this hit, but he was put in charge of it. But once you're given an order, if you refuse, you could very well take that person's place for refusing an order. He mentions that every story being told, he is actually reliving his experience and traumas and triggers. Every experience that he talks about, you can hear the remorse in his voice, the regrets, the sadness, the pain, the emptiness, the anger. He really does take us down a roller coaster of emotion that you forget that he has 19 bodies on his records. I mean, I have to admit, like, I'm extremely dumbfounded by this man because on the surface, he is this ruthless and tough guy capable of anything. But beneath the surface, he is as human as can be. He's just like me and you. Like, yes, you that's watching right now, just like me and you. No difference. He just did a few other things that we wouldn't do, but he's just like us. Really, no difference. I mean, I've met a lot of interesting people in my life, and I've studied some of the greats. Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, John F. Kennedy, Tupac Shakur, Mike Tyson, Princess Diana. These type of characters I'm drawn to because these are the people who all have a sound mind and their ability to think deep about the world and to express these thoughts in such a way that makes them brilliant. I can't help but feel that Sammy fits this cookie cutter. Um, and in this podcast, you really do get to know him personally. And there is no question that this man is brilliant in his own ways. I mean, damn, researchers should really consider studying this man before he, exit this world. A very interesting character to say the least. Let's get into the bad and the ugly. This is the only one thing that I dislike about the podcast. Now, before I begin, I would like to say, Sammy, please do not send a hit squad to my house. Please don't do it. I beg of you. Okay? Now, I love you, man. I like what you represent as a man, and you are truly a man's man. I've listened to every single episode, and you are a man's man. But I'm a trusted source. So I'm here to tell the truth. And I hope that you would appreciate that. So, what I don't like about this podcast is the timeline. It's all over the place. But this is to be expected from a new podcast. Now, down the road, you will hear other stories which fills previous timeline. And I think that this podcast is a great podcast, but I feel like the execution and planning could have been a little bit better, especially in season 3. That was a complete nightmare. I had to listen to it like twice to figure it out. Now, in season 3, there are 5 main episodes, and there are new segment that was introduced to us called the Fireside with the Underboss, and that consisted of 20 episodes. So when I first listened to it, it was hard to follow because the way they released it, it wasn't consecutively, like one after another, while sticking to its theme from season 1 and 2. So for an example, you get one episode, then you would get 2 new segments thereafter, then you would get another main episode with 3 new segments thereafter. It was confusing and it was hard for me to follow. If this is your first time listening to it, I have a hack that I will share with you. Initially, when I first listened to to season 3, I was listening to it as it was actually coming out. So if I was done one, I would have to wait for next week or whenever they release another one. So right now, if you go there, it's all there. You don't have to wait. It's simply all there. Now, if you are a monthly subscriber on Spotify, there is this option or feature where you can download music or podcasts and you can listen to it offline. That means you don't have to be connected to your data nor a Wi Fi connection in order for you to listen to your music or your podcast. So you can download it and you can listen to it offline. So the hack that I have for you is in season 3, I want you to download the main episodes first. And there's about 5. And you can listen to it all consecutively without any interruptions of another timeline. And once you're done that, then you can download the 20 episodes. That is a new segment called The Fireside with the Underboss. And then you can binge listen to the entire 20 episodes there. So this is a little hack for you. And that concludes today's episode. So thank you for visiting. Until next time, peace.